All right, let's get started. Thanks everyone for coming and for joining online. My name is Dan Coleman. For those of you I don't know, I'm an assistant professor of real estate and urban planning here at the University of Arizona. I'm also, especially today, serve as a capacity as one of the co-leads of ARCHES, which is the Arizona Research Center for Housing and Economic Solutions. We're a HUD-funded research center of excellence focused on kind of policy-focused, nonpartisan housing research around the state. One of the things that we get to do with ARCHES, which is really exciting, is to convene events like this to talk about issues that I think are particularly relevant for kind of housing issues in Arizona and the Southwest. So we have a great panel today to talk about the most exciting topic in the world, I know, construction defect liability. But it is something that, as we have dug into it, as at least from the research side, it is kind of an incredibly interesting and kind of meaningful policy that really affects how and what we build in Arizona and lots of other places. So before kind of going into my opening spiel, I want to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. So Sarah, if you want to start us off.
Hi, everyone in the audience and also online. Very happy to be here. A lot of housing nerds in the house specific to this topic. And I really want to thank you and ULI and the University of Arizona and Morrison Institute, because this is, and I've heard this from a number of people over the past few weeks, that this is one of the most important things we need to tackle in the state. And we'll go into the reasons why on that a little bit. So although it sounds a little wonky and maybe abstract, it really is an impactful thing at how we address affordability in Arizona. So that being said, my name is Sarah Ligori. I'm from Tucson. I represent Legislative District 5 and the House of Representatives, which is the Central Phoenix corridor. I'm a longtime member of ULI. I've worked with a co-panelist here on that for probably a decade now on all things. And so this is one of the things that we're looking at from a legislative perspective. I've worked in real estate development, and I've also worked for a statewide nonprofit where I oversaw their impact investing for affordable housing and then putting together their homelessness and housing strategy.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Max Campagna. I echo what Sarah said in the beginning in terms of how important this is for housing issue here in the Valley. And in the state. And I just want to say, my background is pretty much just a practitioner. I've been working in real estate development and construction for over 10 years now. I've built duplexes, fourplexes, townhome communities, and they've all been for rent. And I'd love to discuss why that is and why it's difficult for someone like me that owns a small business to be able to provide for sale condominiums or townhomes to the residents here in Arizona.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Sarah, for a reminder. So ARCHES, University of Arizona, ASU, Morrison Institute, Brockman Institute here, and then ULI was a kind co-sponsor helping the whole bring this topic to us as a research group, and then also helping publicize the event today. So before we get into the discussion, I want to just let's say make a couple observations and then raise a few facts to help sort of ground our discussion here. The observation or statement, and so we can discuss this in the Q&A if folks want to push back on it. But I think to meet housing demand in Arizona and in the Southwest generally, we need to diversify our housing state, right? We've probably reached or nearing the limit of our ability to kind of grow unfettered horizontally. And so we need to kind of grow more vertically, right? And that means kind of building more densely, in our urban areas already, right? So that's my statement, right? Kind of one of the motivating things for me in this topic. A few facts then, right? And I think multifamily housing as a product generally uses land more efficiently kind of by definition, right? I think we can all sort of agree on that. It can also be, as a housing form and a housing product, more water and energy efficient, right? And it can be more affordable, right? Can be an operative. It doesn't have to be. You can build very high-end, luxury, kind of attached product. But I think it can be kind of a more affordable type of due to construction costs and things like that. Also, if you're using one of your main inputs, land, more efficiently, as I sort of started off my comment, right? And especially, and something that we haven't really realized or seen a lot of in Arizona can be an affordable entry point into homeownership, right? By virtue of being a little bit more efficient to build and also being the smaller units and attached and things like that, shared amenities. So those are kind of my facts about multifamily housing. A couple kind of data points, again, to sort of motivate our conversation here. The good news and maybe less or more complicated news. So the good news is that we are building more multifamily in Arizona than we have historically, right? From 2020 to 2024, we issued as a state about 100,000 permits for multifamily units. So units in kind of attached structures. This comprises about 35% of all permitted units. So all the units that are permitted single family detached, 35% are in multifamily structures approximately. This is almost double what we produced in the 5 years previous, right? So if you look back to 2015 to 2019, we permitted about 50,000 multifamily units, right? So almost doubling in raw numbers in that kind of decade period. And even back in 2015 to 2019, 26% of all units were in multifamily structures, right? So we're producing more units, we're building more units in raw numbers, doubling in this 10-year period. And we're also building more as a portion of all permitted units in the state, right? So that's kind of the good news that I'm going to start us off with. The bad news, or the more complicating news, at least relative to this discussion, is that's overwhelmingly rental product, right? If you look at census estimates, housing units built 2020 or later in the state, only 1% of that is owner occupied. Right, so of that 100,000 units we've built since 2020, only about 1,000 of them are for sale, kind of in their, at least at their launch, right? If you go back, so the 2 decades previous, so 2000 to 2019, of those units built in that period, 6% are owner occupied. And if you go back even 2 decades farther, so 1980 to 1999, about 11% are owner occupied, right? A caveat here, some of this is like, we don't have data on what these units were when they were initially constructed. So some of these could have been rental product that's shifted over to owner occupied, but I think the trend is still pretty evident. We're really building essentially no kind of multifamily for sale at its construction. And so this is kind of what I want to prime us with for our conversation here. And kind of leaves me with the question is like, why are we making progress in one area, but not in the other, right? So we're building more multifamily. Good. That multifamily is really kind of a very specific product type rental occupancy, right? And then as kind of a housing researcher and a housing nerd, I do want to caveat to say that we're obviously talking about defect liability today. There's very few housing problems where there is one lever to fix or one kind of problem that's causing it, right? So there could be other things that are kind of leading to the type of development patterns we're seeing in the state. I want to say land use and zoning. We've made some big reforms at the State House to kind of increase densities across the state. And I think that's probably playing into the more multifamily development we're seeing generally and things we'll see to come. But it's still restrictions on development that could affect the calculation that developers are making in this side of the product to deliver. Another thing that we've seen both statewide and I think nationally is just a decline in low and moderate income homeownership, right? And there's lots of reasons why this is the case. We can get into it and debate it if you want. I want to say strict lending standards coming out of the Great Recession is probably part of the reason. Stagnant incomes and rising debts. And then, these things are all related to delayed household formation, right? So especially in this, entry level homeowner kind of a slice of the income distribution, we're seeing lower rates of homeownership, right? Again, those are caveats. I think really what we want to talk about today, though, is defect liability, the role that affects, and particularly from a development and a legislative perspective, the impact that has on the decision to build multifamily first off, and then once you've made that decision, the type of multifamily you build. So with that, I want to start a question here for Max. Maybe from a developer or builder perspective, can you share kind of how our current defect liability law affects that calculation, that decision as to what to build?
Yeah, that was a great introduction. A lot of important data points there. So from our perspective, I'll take you into building a townhome project from a budgeting perspective. So we're a general contractor as well, so we work with our subcontractors. When we reach out and let them know that we have a townhome project that we want to build, the first question they ask us is it for sale or is it for rent? If it is condominiumized or for sale townhomes, they will not bid the project because they do not have the insurance that is capable for them to actually build a project and insure them individually. So what we have to do as the development team is we have to provide a wrap insurance policy. This wrap insurance policy provides a 10-year, insurance for the liability for a 10-year term that protects both the builder, the subcontractors, and all the parties involved. So you can imagine that insurance product is quite expensive, and it has only been getting more expensive over the years. In terms of the budget, we recently actually got a quote for this insurance product. It was about 3% of the total construction project. And to have you understand what that would look like, 3% is pretty much our concrete budget. The only thing higher than 3% is about 4% for our framing budget. So it is a very large line item when it comes to our expenses. So you can imagine when we're looking at this, when we're looking at it from a development's perspective, or we're building this for another group from the ownership perspective, this is a big ticket item. This is something that really has to be taken into consideration for financial costs. And as we continue to see, this is where you just pull the rental lever and you move forward on that.
And Sarah, do you have any, have you heard some other things from constituents or, keeping on just the impact that it has on the developer's decision?
Yeah, and I think just to put maybe a number that I've heard from multiple states is that the insurance is for a for sale product versus a for rent can be up to 233% higher than a for rent. And so that makes you kind of pause and realize that if a project doesn't pencil on paper, it's not moving forward from that point. So really just even at that very start, even though good intentions might be there, looking at the costs and the risks when you look at the numbers and see what the insurance costs, and then also factor in what I've heard from a number of people that you're guaranteed to get sued. You're guaranteed is the word that I heard in that year 7 before that year 8. It's really, can you stomach the risk, and then can you also pencil the project out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so maybe a question for you then, and maybe returning to my opening comments a little bit, what role do you see for attached owner occupied housing and kind of addressing housing access and affordability issues?
Yeah, I think you did a great job in kind of outlining it. So I've lived in a number of townhomes. I lived in one, just down the street from here in U of A and in Phoenix. I love them. They're like one of my favorite type of housing products. And what we find with condos and townhomes is that they can be like the first rung on the homeownership ladder. They're 20 to 40% more affordable or more than single family homes. They fit a wide range of niche for demographics. So seniors looking to downsize, new married couples without kids or one kid, single people, working families. So it really is a demographic. And what I'm hearing now, not just in my role in my district, but I'm also reading across the country, is that townhomes are the #1 sought after housing product because of the affordability, because of the flexibility, and because they fit the needs of a wide range of demographic of buyers out there. And also what we're looking at is, again, to the points you made in your opening comments, we have been so heavy on building rental products, so heavy. We have, we come to downtown Phoenix, you see so many cranes. And rental products are great, but we are, I think, one of the highest rental markets or build-to-rent markets in the state. And when we start to get too heavy-handed in any one direction, it makes you pause to think of like, well, people are renting and that's great. But what about those that might want to get their foot in the door in home ownership and might want to build generational wealth or accumulate wealth? If we see the statistics of homeowners versus renters, the net worth value and the growth that they could get, not everyone might want to buy. But I think we're missing out on a huge swath of people. Our teachers, our firefighters, the people in our community have no option for home ownership now. And it's significantly related back to this fact, this affordable, sought after, desirable product for homeownership is simply not there at all anymore for them to choose from.
Thank you. Max, anything, do you see similar things from your clients and customers? Or?
Yeah, no, I echo Sarah's thoughts there. We see it from, from the residents of our communities. That's the residents that we have, right? They're young professionals, they're young married couples that are ready to start a family. They're seniors that are looking to downsize from their single family detached home. And we provide the product. There's demand for it clearly. But we cannot provide, we can't financially provide the product if they want to buy it from us. And that's unfortunate, right, from the economic conditions.
Thank you. So sticking with you, Max, so what kind of reforms to construction defect liability in Arizona do you think would improve kind of your ability as a developer and builder to construct townhomes and condos, that product that you're seeing demand for, but your inability to pencil and practice. Well, again, while still keeping kind of, and I want to make sure that we keep this balanced while still keeping those consumer protections. Like, can you talk about some reforms that you've looked at?
Yeah, no, that's the big thing is balance, right? So consumer protection is really important. There's always going to be bad actors, and we want to make sure that the consumer is protected from those. But it feels like the pendulum is just swung a little too much in that direction. And so in the sense that like the reforms, there's been a lot of, and Sarah can speak to this as well, there's been a lot of reforms from other states, different categories of what we can do. Obviously like something as it sounds simple, but it's very not. But like instead of like a 8-year, 10-year tail liability, cutting that down to like 5 or 6, right? You would imagine that would be low-hanging fruit, but it is it's not that simple. There's a lot of complexities in terms of maintaining, as you mentioned, the consumer protection side of things. But there are things like the warranties themselves, right? So from the construction standpoint, we have a workmanship warranty that we have to provide, right? There's a 1-2-year workmanship warranty that we provide through the registrar of contractors here in Arizona. If there's any issues, we go to arbitration. The registrar of contractors handles that very well in a certain sense, right? It protects the consumer and also makes sure that there's workmanship quality when it comes to construction standards. When it comes to the standards of structural defect and those aspects, at least for me, I think there should be more clarity in that aspect, right? There should be a better procedure to understand how a developer or a contractor can remedy any of those, you can imagine some of them can be unforeseen, but just those issues that a project could have in structural, in the structural issues. If we could have some time to remedy those issues. There's also the aspect of an HOA board having kind of a personal liability aspect to it as well, right? So these volunteers of an HOA board get scared when they see, potential, call it a class action lawsuit, right? An attorney group that comes into play and they say, hey, look, like you guys are all personally liable on your board if there's issues with the project. Maybe there's some sort of kind of protections, right? Maybe a volunteer board and HOA is treated a little bit differently than like a corporation that gets paid, right? That kind of aspect. So there's all these small little details. There's also Texas has an opt-in aspect for third-party inspections. So instead of a 8-year liability, maybe you can reduce it to 6 years. But as a developer, as a contractor, you ask for a third-party inspection process where you still have your inspection with the municipality and make sure everything's good there with the plans. But there's also, maybe it comes from the state, a certain department, or a qualified third-party company that can also inspect and ensure that, okay, well, you did, you went above and beyond what you needed to, and instead of having an 8-year liability, maybe it's reduced to 6 or 5. However, but those are the things I think we really need to start thinking about. And I know Sarah can speak to that and what she's been doing.
Yeah, you want to add up?
Sure.
Yeah.
Max said a lot of them, so I'll try to figure out what is missing, but I will say that there is a movement in addressing this. So in Arizona for the past 2 years, there's been bills that have been introduced in the legislature to try to address condo defect liability reform. They haven't gone far. I don't think either of them made it to committee. which is where we hear and discuss and kind of talk through amendments. But externally outside of Arizona, and I like to bring this up because Arizona is not unique in a housing affordability vacuum, right? The whole country is going through that. Every state has a varying degree. Same thing with condo defect reform. So we look at states like Texas, Colorado just passed a big package. I was talking to some Washington legislators last night. They're taking another crack at it this year. Utah, California. So this is just, it seems to be isolated or really a huge problem in like the Southwest Sunbelt states. But that's not saying that it's not just limited to here. So it's not just an Arizona issue. This is a multi-state issue when it comes to housing production and affordability. So what Arizona is doing is we're really trying to bring it to a place where we can take a look at the process, make sure it addresses problems quickly, really figure out how to address defects, which are structural and safety versus maintenance, wear and tear, cosmetic type of things. So how do we separate those two out? Because from what I've seen, they're all kind of lumped together. And then how do we make sure we're protecting home buyers and that nothing that we do legislatively will unintentionally, cause the slowdown in the production so that we can bring condos and townhomes back to market. A couple of the other things just top of mind from what we're looking at is also making sure that money from a lawsuit or an insurance settlement is used to go directly towards fixing that defect. So it's not a way for the HOA to just hold the money in reserves. It's not a way to spend money somewhere else. But if we're signaling that there's a clear defect and we want to protect the homeowner, the best way we can protect the homeowner is to make sure that that defect is repaired. Because really, at the end of the day, who's on the hook for that defect? The homeowner. They carry that with them when they try to sell their property. They will have to disclose if it was fixed or not. And so what we want to make sure we do is, again, balancing those protections for the homeowner and saying, hey, if there is a defect, a legitimate defect, and it goes through the process, you will be made whole and that defect will be fixed so that you can continue living there safely, move on from it, and then also so it's not carried with you. Whenever you might want to sell it and then you have trouble because there's a defect on your record that wasn't properly addressed in the past.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, and this is sort of a question we didn't prepare, but I'd be curious, Max, maybe could you walk us through what, if you were to build a condo or a townhouse project, let's say worst case scenario, how do you think this might play out today with the current legislation we have?
Yeah, so starting with what Sarah said in the beginning, like you're bound to get sued. So that aspect is very real. Like there's we work within the bell curve of risk, but this is a tail risk. This is a tail risk that's on the outside of the bell curve that we know is going to happen. It's not like a black swan event. This is a very white swan that has happened to many developers and developers that are much more successful than myself and very well known here in town, like that have done incredible projects. And I can only imagine that their teams and the general construction companies that have worked through those projects have been, dotted their I's and crossed their T's, and yet still they have this liability and they get sued. Yeah. And so in my regard, yeah, I mean, I would have to not only purchase the RAP insurance policy, and then probably try and figure out ways to have a substantial amount of reserves as well, because I wouldn't just rely on the insurance product itself in 8 years, right? And who knows where I'm going to be in 8 years with our company, right? And so it's just it feels rather, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a prudent business decision, right? At the end of the day, we're just a small business, and many of us are here in real estate and in development in that sense. And so, I unfortunately, I don't see it going well if I wouldn't do it today.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things that I've sort of realized through this process and the kind of research we've done is that, one of the reasons why, you correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but that, condos or multifamily product is a particular target for a lawsuit is that you go to the HOA and you do have issues that would be more common within a multifamily product, but it's you can have a larger lawsuit that's going to affect multiple owners at the same time, as opposed to going to individual, class action lawsuit, as opposed to going to individual homeowners within a subdivision, for example. It's it skews development awfully to rental product, but then also just away from attached at the same time.
So, yeah, two good things on that, and kind of what I've learned through this conversation is in Arizona, we've worked on defect reform for single family and then detached and then also for attached product. And what I'm hearing from the single family side is the reforms were great. I don't want to misquote the number, but I think it was something like, only 4% of the product, goes through this and has liability issues. So it's worked in the single family and detached market. Where we have the trouble here is again, because of what you brought up of the lawsuits and the guarantee to get sued. So how are we looking at to make sure that that same product has the same sort of protections and balance, right? So.
Yeah. No. Maybe sticking with you then, Sarah, you talked a little bit about some of the current movement in the Arizona legislature, or do you want to kind of expand on that, kind of specifically what you're looking at this legislative season?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's been filed as a bill the past 2 years. We have great interest in this. A lot of the housing work we do, and we're trying to do better on this, is work city and state hand in hand. And there's a number of cities that are very engaged on this. So last year, a council member out of Phoenix was the one to really spearhead this, and it's one of her priority, Vice Mayor Ann O'Brien. It's a priority issue for her because she identifies the need for that type of housing in her district and beyond. So there has been a robust, diversified group, bipartisan, Senate and House members, state and city members. We have insurance at the table. We have developers, builders, contractors, architects. So we're really leaning in to say, okay, the past 2 years have been building, but we haven't really been able to take a good crack at the apple. So where do we go right now? Because also, I'll let you know what's going on in the legislatures. We've done some good work on the housing front with missing middle and ADUs, and we've been able to fund housing projects, but we're a little bit stagnant right now. And we don't have potentially any funding to put towards like Department of Housing. Our low-income housing tax credit program is expiring next month. And so I think it really gives us a push and forces us to come to the table to say, we need to really find ways to be impactful to bring homeownership opportunities. One, because we've talked about how we have an oversaturated rental market. And two, continue to address this affordability crisis so that everyone from, young kids to aging adults can have different choices of products that they want to live in and afford it. And so that's really where our group of stakeholders is coming together on to say, this will make a difference in Arizona, and this is a product that we need to be looking at.
Max, anything to add on to it? Legislative side, maybe let's say.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to fall back on the other question you had. There is a product that I can build, and that is we can condominiumize apartments, and then we can sell them for $5 million probably. I think maybe that could make the number work, right? So in the great scheme of things, there's economics that can work. But to the beginning of your intro, if we want attainable housing and we want equitable housing, we obviously know that's not a solution. So that's and honestly, like to make attainable housing for sale, attainable attached housing product today, the numbers don't pass them. Yeah.
And I think you had brought this up in the calls early too, but another solution would be to build rental housing, hold it for 8 to 10 years, and then convert it to owner. So like the data that I was kind of quoting at the beginning, probably there's some of that happening. I would imagine we're seeing townhouses or condos being built but rented out for go ahead.
I'll go really quick and say that there are apartment complexes that are getting built today that are deed restricted. For 8 years, but they will not be condominiumized. So these very large Class A, beautiful apartments that are getting built all around the town, the owners, the developers of those projects are then selling those to new owners. But they're saying, new owners, you cannot condominiumize this for 8 years because we don't want that liability. So that opportunity is gone.
And also some examples I've heard, and I think they're worth mentioning because it's like you know, in a developer or builder's world, it's like you're trying to bring a product to market and you have to you have to make it work on all these levels. And there's so much risk involved and there's so many variables involved. Layered on top of this is if you want to, and I've talked to so many developers that are like, we want to build townhomes. We've got them penciled for like $315,000. We can build a 20-unit complex, you know, in Central Phoenix. But what's happening is that it's forcing developers to get so creative and get so far. It makes it so hard. I've heard that, you know, they're leaving there. I was talking to someone last night that it's like, well, we're gonna do it, but we're not gonna do a shared wall. We're gonna leave like a couple inches gap. So then like that will protect us. And then it's like, well, we're gonna get an investor to come in and he's gonna buy them all. And then if he buys them all, we can still build townhomes which is self-insured and then no one will come and sue us. And you're like, that's great. You know, A plus for creativity, but where does that, and I truly mean that, but why should we be having to bend over backwards and twist ourselves into knots? And we just said that it's 1% of the housing supply. In California, it was, I think, down to 3%, and in Colorado, it's around 4%. There's just a problem here that we need to address, and all kind of roads pencil back to here of the lawsuits have gotten to a point where they are so extreme and abundant that we just really, that's where I think that this is really the most impactful lane we can go on so that these can be built and developers don't have to go so far off path in order to just make something work to build a product that they want, that the public wants.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe we've had some big kind of housing reforms at the State House in the last couple of years. How do you see this change enhancing or affecting some of those reforms that we've seen in the last couple of years?
That's a great question, and I love it because this is why I love construction defect liability. And it's like the first thing I mentioned this for last night. You know, it excites me because the work that I think we've been doing at the state legislature is exactly missing middle to various degrees. So legalizing ADUs in the state gives flexibility, gives homeowners the ability to build something, to have family move in, to rent it out if they need. The literal missing middle of allowing duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes in different areas in the state, again, a tax missing middle, diversifying that housing product. And then for me, the addressing the construction defect liability is again condos and townhomes. So I like to say it's spectrum where, you know, Arizona, well, if I'm wrong, Allison, 80% of our land is zoned for single family housing. And we've been one of the highest markets for, you know, large scale apartments. So what does that leave us? It literally leaves us in the middle. And so ADUs and duplexes and townhomes and triplexes, like it's letting us have this diversification of products so that anyone and everyone can find a home that suits them. And all of the things I just mentioned are inherently more affordable, if not the most affordable housing options. So I really think it checks the box, especially on this one with the homeownership component, which is direly missing. I hear it all the time from people. You know, I'm in my 40s and I have sisters and friends that are in their 30s that kind of miss the affordability phase in Arizona. I could still buy a home when I was coming of age, post-graduation, you know, working for $300,000 in one of the best areas in Phoenix. That home is now $750,000. I would never be able to afford that. I would never be able to afford the home I'm in right now. So what we're getting at is we're also trying to unlock home ownership for the different generations that are on this too. And so that's why working on this excites me.
And then maybe I'll reframe the question for you, Max. If this reform were to go through and like thinking about some of the other reforms that you've seen in the Phoenix Metro, what is the kind of product that you would look to build? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I build the same product I'm building now, but just from a legal perspective, right? That's how simple it is, right? We know we can build this product. We know that there's an economic demand for it. We see it working countless times on the rental side, but we cannot, you know, in the sense of what we've been talking about today, like just plat it for individual townhomes or plat it for a condominium and sell them individually. It's unfortunate. So if that reform, you know, if certain reform measures would go through at the legislature here in Arizona, I mean, from the economic side of the standpoint, the demand is there, and we'd love to build it, right? Well, we know how to build it, we know where to build it. It's just an aspect of being able to kind of limit tail risk liability, right? And then the numbers will work, and that's it, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, as someone who's, I haven't been in this game that long, but has done a lot of research on the zoning reforms, that was like kind of the first bar, and then you find these other issues that are kind of down the waterfall that we're always constraining, and we're always impacting how developers and the builders for zoning projects. But we just didn't get that far. But now that we've made some wins on kind of the supply side, I think are at least freeing up and kind of acknowledging that we need to build a little more densely, that there's other issues that still exist. I guess maybe, so I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. So maybe one question for Sarah, and you can send it to next too. Have you heard from, constituents kind of affected by construction defect liability, and maybe either positively or negatively?
Yeah, I kind of laugh and smile at that question because I've found two complexes in my district about 2 miles from each other. They're both in their 7th year, and they both have received lawsuits in the past 4 months. So I've been talking to the developers and the builders of those projects for their perspective, and then I also happen to know residents that live in both of those projects. So it's been interesting to get educated from both sides of the coin in real time. But if I could just blanket it, I know we're being repetitive at this point. Any developer and builder that I talk to acknowledges this is a problem. There's probably a little bit of exploitation happening with these lawsuits, and so many of them want to build this product. So I feel like I'm going through it in real time with some constituents and friends, and then also the stakeholders who have in the room trying to address it. It's actually very interesting.
How about you, Max? I mean, I'm sure, obviously, a topic of conversation with the building community, but within your friends and folks you know.
Yeah, I mean, from the builder community, I hear it all the time. So that one's easier in terms of just like Sarah was saying, after 7 years, you're bound to get sued. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really just the people I talk to about the housing affordability issue we have here in the valley, right? Like that's the biggest thing. And I guess what we see from our residents, especially, tenants that are interested in our product, or potential tenants, they always ask us, is it for sale, right? They would love to own our townhomes, but we can't provide that to them. So, right there, I know we're kind of being repetitive here, but in that sense, like, yeah, the demand's there, and unfortunately, the development community is getting sued, left and right, I guess you could say.
Yeah, please.
Add on to that. Because I also think what's important is I think that probably most people in the room and tuning in online have some varying level of degree of what construction defect liability is. But I think that another important point of this conversation is that how can we educate homeowners? How can we educate the HOAs? How do we let people know, okay, here's the pros of a lawsuit, here's the cons, here's the process, here's your rights. And so that's a big piece that we're trying to solve for also is how do we just educate the public at large from something as simple as, do you know why there's no condos or townhomes that you see for new popping up? And asking, and then to your question to the residents I was talking to that live in the communities is, what is that process and what are the implications for you? Because are they getting the full clear picture of understanding their rights and understanding that, hey, while this lawsuit is going on, we cannot sell or move from your place. You're kind of frozen there. This defect doesn't get fixed, you may not be able to get financing on the back end for someone else coming in. And what is a defect versus what is cosmetic? What maintenance records have been done? So it's really kind of opening up a broader conversation also to educate the public at large about why we don't have, I know we have some, but I want to say any new condos or townhomes being built, and then also educating homeowners and the associations to understand the full picture and what that gamut looks like.
Well, we're right on time for questions, so I know we have a number of people online, so if you're online, please enter your questions in the chat, and we'll monitor the chat and select someone, and anyone else in the room. In the room, I will run out with my microphone if you have a question, or a comment, or want to join the discussion.
No. Next question, actually, this is, just getting a very little about defect liability. Is the length of time different between single family and, multifamily?
Isn't it? Of course. Yeah, I don't know, I've been so focused on, so single family, I think, was worked on like a decade plus ago, so I was not involved with that. I was looking at shared ball, but I do want to say I can't wait till Arches takes it. The subject. Yeah, I actually I don't want to say yes or no, because I don't know,
That's fair.
confirm if it is different for the shared versus the detached.
Okay, I have another question now.
Yeah.
If, not to. Or do you have questions? Do you have a sense of what a typical payout is for like a liability, defect, lawsuit? Like per unit or something?
Well, I mean, it depends, because, one of the last projects, again, in my district, that was sued and went through the process is a very large project, very expensive project. And then I'm thinking of the two others in my district that are like, you know, in eighth of the size. And so I think it does both. The key point also that I want to touch on to your question is understanding the attorney's fees in this too. And so, you know, the attorneys in the lawsuits or the settlement, you know, take the first lion's share of the cut, and then the rest goes to the HOA. So I think it's interesting to say that, you know, maybe attorneys take a third of whatever that settlement is, and then the rest trickles back down to the HOAs. And transparency and attorney's fees, I think, is a big piece of this too, because there are large sums, but are they even large enough to cover everything that was in the defect lawsuit or settlement? And that's that education piece of what money is there, where is it gonna go, and is it enough? Because if it's not, and you went through this whole process of a lawsuit, you still have a defect on your books. And to me, that's problematic for the homeowner. But I think it depends. I heard back and forth, you know, numbers of 30,000 a door, 50,000 a door, 70,000 a door. So I think it just depends on the size of the project and how lengthy the settlement and the lawsuit ends up being.
Thank you. I'm gonna turn off. Is it on? I got really excited. Thank you. This obviously is a big piece of the puzzle. And, you know, even last night, while our Tucson Mayor Council were talking about middle housing, one of our council members mentioned condo defect law. I feel like often there's pointing fingers, and the city thinks that it's the state's fault and vice versa. In this case, knowing that it has to be state intervention, right? It's a state level statute, so it has to be the legislature that does something. Is advocacy our best option at this point to continue pushing our state reps to help make these changes? Because if it is something that can only happen at that state level, it seems like you all can work your butts off, but what can we do in kind of pushing that button a little more on our end?
That's a great question, and yes, period, yes, exclamation point. And the city of Tucson has been so wonderful on this. I remember talking to them early on, like last session, on their advocacy on it. City of Phoenix is front and center on this. I've talked to the city of Tempe. So yes, any advocacy, because again, this affects everyone in state. It's not like one city gets to build townhomes and the other city doesn't. So we do need to address it from statewide, and any sort of advocacy is great, especially for this, because people might not be aware, even my colleagues might not be fully aware of what it is or what it does, but we truly value the input of our cities. We truly value the input of the building community and those affected by it. So I would say, bare minimum, figure out who your legislator is, email them, saying, hey, condos and townhomes aren't being built in state anymore, anything you can do to address that, I see that as an affordable homeownership. Even just putting it into the conversation would be very helpful, so advocacy would be great as we move forward. We're building a big coalition on this, because it is so important.
Yeah, I feel like with a lot of housing issues, we've learned that like we're advocating for a population that doesn't exist structurally because of the thing we're advocating for, right? So it could be members and a formal owner occupied, but as a counter example. But yeah, you think that
Yeah, I think advocacy is definitely front and center, and we see it from city councils as well. So city council members that when we present a project and they ask us why isn't it for sale, right? So then we discuss it with them, and we know that they're getting their information from their constituents, and we also see that from neighborhood meetings as well, right? So neighborhood meetings, and we get our neighbors, and they say, hey, why aren't these for sale townhomes? And so the more that we can advocate for it and explain it and information that we can provide to just the general public. I definitely feel like now the municipalities are definitely hearing it, right? The city council is hearing from their constituents. So we can just kind of keep moving that ladder all the way till we get to the legislator and kind of just letting them know that this is a big issue and this will really help housing the whole state.
Yes, who gets to determine that a defect exists and like how are they involved in the process? Like, they have a financial stake in it, or you know, how does that work?
Go ahead again.
All right, so I'll give you, so what, obviously, I thank the Lord that I have not been part of this process yet, but from word of mouth, what I hear is, there are attorney groups that come to the HOA and, they will let the HOA know that they are personally liable for these defect liabilities. And then, there seems to be also a testing process that, is maybe in cahoots with the attorney process as well, but in the sense of like, hey, there's this crack on your drywall. Let's like look into it. There's not really like a really true third party that doesn't have any skin in the game, right? And so you're playing with a player that really has a lot of skin in the game to make sure that this lawsuit comes through and comes to fruition. That's how I've been hearing it, word of mouth in the community. I'm sure Sarah can explain it much better than I can.
No, that's pretty accurate. I'm kind of racking my brain through all the conversations I've had, but I heard things, really even from when projects are built and HOAs are formed, they're being contacted by defect attorneys. And homeowners are being contacted by defect attorneys at point of sale. So that's year one, right? And then keeping in touch along the way, and then at that year 6, at year 7, reaching out and saying, hey, you know, any issues, can we come inspect? Or hey, we saw that your curb was cracked. And so it really just kind of opens the door for the attorneys to come in, and then, you know, I've heard things like they find one thing and they say, well, we're going to open up this whole wall, and they open up the wall, and they open up the lighting, and so it's I guess the short answer to your question is, from what I heard, it's primarily driven by the defect attorneys. And that's what we're trying to understand the process and educate and see if we can get some third party inspectors in that are independent from that. And then also, if there is a defect, separating, you know, defect from maintenance or cosmetic. We've heard things like your pool fence is rusty. Well, it's, you know, 7 years in the sun in Arizona. A, wasn't maintained, and B, is that just with normal wear and tear. Right, and being clear on that is one thing, and then also, if there is a defect, allowing the developer to come back in, because the developers that I know of, like, you know, their reputation, their money, their future business, like their name is all on the line, and they want to correct it if it is a defect. So giving them the opportunity through what's called the right to repair, of going in and saying, okay, here's what's identified, here's maybe what's cosmetic, here's maybe what's structural and safety, and giving them the opportunity to go in over 2 or 3 months to be able to correct it. And I'm hoping if we can really address that, that maybe the defects can be addressed before it gets too far gone down the line with some of the insurance side.
Maybe do one more in the room and then go back to.
My big question is, why don't we have a form already? So who's holding us back? And so you all mentioned the defect kind of attorneys, and so I'm thinking like that's probably an interest group that's kind of invested in the current system, that maybe there's some pushback happening to reform. If you could talk a little bit more about what are the other kind of stakeholder groups that might be invested in this, and I don't know, think about consumer protection and kind of things like that, then we have to kind of figure out how to, you know, understand where they're coming from and how to move forward to get reform.
Yeah. It's a great question because it is a balancing act, right? And that's why I mentioned with our stakeholder groups, we have, you know, 6 or 7 different industries in the room that it might touch. I look at places like Colorado and other states, and they've done a number of different reforms. Arizona has as well. I don't think as robustly to the shared wall side. But it just doesn't feel like it's moved the needle enough. And so it is because you're balancing consumer protection, and development and insurance and trial attorneys and builders and subcontractors and homeowners and HOA associations. You have a lot of people in the room, and you have to make sure that, especially with policy, anything you do on one side might make someone angry on the other side. And so we have to come at it not from a balanced approach to make sure we're balancing homeowner protection, but also that we're addressing the heart of what it is in order to, you know, make sure that true defect problems are addressed and resolved, but we can minimize what might be frivolous lawsuits coming through from the point of just a business practice model on the attorney side. So it's been difficult, and we've had some key opposition the past 2 years, the same opposition. But then I look at other states, and that opposition kind of switches and moves around too, depending on what amendments they run and how they look at it. So it's not, even though it's a cut and dry problem, when you look at it, it's not necessarily a cut and dry policy solution for the reasons kind of you brought up.
Well, and it is unique as well from the developer's perspective. The development community in the past years historically has always supported city council races, right? Municipal races, because that's what impacts projects the most. Now that there's more state preemption and state bills through housing, I think it's also in the purview of the development community to kind of focus some of that effort there as well. So it's probably a lack of that as well from the development community itself to really. But of course, there's the Realtors Association, the home builders, and so forth, AMA. But yeah, maybe there's more of a there should be, at least in my view, more focus from the development community to really focus on supporting individuals like Sarah, right? And like in the sense of housing advocates at the state legislature, we certainly don't have that as much support as we see in city council races.
Appreciate that.
So as I walk back to our table for some Zoom questions, I do want to make sure that I acknowledge the tremendous work of Paul George Blazevich, our Arches Fellow, and Master's student of planning here at University of Rosanna, who really has done a lot of the initial legwork and the heavy lift of this event. So thank you all, Paul. But
okay, hello, thank you for being here to you two and driving down from Phoenix. We have a couple of Zoom questions I just wanted to focus on. So I believe Brian's still on the call here. See him, but he had a couple of good questions. Does anyone on the panel have data on the percentage of recent condo developments that become the target of defect law? So someone mentioned, and Brian said this as well, someone mentioned data about detached housing lawsuits, but any percentage of, you know, how many condo, like, is it 98%, is it 70%? Any data on that?
100.
100%?
Yeah,
That's what we're hearing. 100%.
you will be. Yeah.
You're guaranteed.
Okay, great.
sorry, I wish there was another answer.
Okay, so that's one. Brian had another good question, which I don't think we talked about at all. There has been talk about single stairway buildings and how those might impact development. He's wondering if there's been any talk about at the state legislature level about single stairway.
Brian, a housing nerd. I hope he's still on. No, I love it. So this particular issue is actually just starting to creep into our ecosphere. There was a report that the Mercatus Institute came out with yesterday. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know if it includes single stair, but it does have certain code and permit processing reforms that they've studied intently in Arizona in the past 6 or 7 months. So my quick answer to Brian is early discussions, really early, trying to bring it into the part of what we look at in as far as reform in Arizona, but we have not yet really had a concentrated focus on what that policy would be yet. But I love that he's bringing it up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. Let's see. I think I have one more I'd like to ask. David Higuera is just wondering, anyone in the legislature that we should be, let's see, who are the key committee chairs and ranking members who need to be educated about this and the need for these types of reforms? I believe that's his first question. David's second question is right to repair part of the legislative agenda as well?
So I'll answer the second part first. Yes. So right to repair is what we're looking at, really defining that timeline. So more to come on that, but yes, the answer is yes on that as we work through language. We think that's a key, important early step in the process to say, hey, we can repair it, let's repair it. Then we don't have to go through the lawsuit and the settlement and the money and the homeowner's time. I would say if, so I'm on the housing, and I chair the Housing and Homelessness Caucus, and it's bipartisan, and it's the Senate and the House. And this is a very bipartisan issue. I will let you know at the legislature. Homeownership is very important to my Republican colleagues. Affordable housing, homeownership is very important to my Democratic colleagues. It's just managing that balance of consumer protections along the lines of knowing this is something we need to do. So I would say whoever his legislator is, I'd start there, send in 3 emails. And then if this bill were to move through, and actually get heard in committee, we have a commerce committee or a government committee, and those would probably be the 2 likely committees that this would go to. But I'd be happy to kind of connect with him and keep him involved in the process too. But it's so important to reach out to your legislator, and it's so important to reach out to the committee chairs of whatever issue you care about or whatever policy you want to comment on. And you can find all that online at azledge.gov. You can look up who the committee members are, just click on their email and it pops up and you can send in your thoughts.
One quick follow-up. David also asked, were there any stated concerns from those committee chairs that were not being explored or,
No, not yet. It just, it's stalled too early in the process. So no.
Any other questions from the room? You did a good job.
Yeah.
So I come from this from the urban planning perspective, the public sector perspective. So I'm curious, it sounds like the defects really run the gamut, but do you see any opportunities for the cities as far as, design standards, looking at material requirements, inspection, enforcement to help as part of the solution to this whole problem?
I mean, my answer is yes to that. I'd love to talk to, my city counterparts to explore that conversation further because the city is very heavily involved, on these issues doing inspections initially. So where is there room for improvement or clarity? I would love to explore that.
No, that's a great question. I know the cities are incentivized to provide this type of product to their, so I'd say, inspections, right? They're already doing the inspections. If there's a way that they can, provide some sort of third, it doesn't even have to be third party now. It could be just in-house. Yeah, if there's a way we can figure that one out, that would be great. Because we see, I mean, we've seen city-owned land where we talked to the housing department and the economic development department, and they want for sale townhomes. And unfortunately, you have to let them know we can't do it, right? No matter how much, no matter if, what the price of the land is. And so they are very incentivized to try and provide this housing product for ownership. So that's a great question. I'd love to see if there's a way we can kind of see if there's some levers we can pull there.
One more, I'll make it.
I also had a personal question from me. So, I have some family in Tempe and I've just been kind of looking around downtown Tempe, slightly west of downtown Tempe. And it seems like there's a lot of like newer townhome development going on there. My question was, is it just that they're charging enough that those pencil out? Are they rental townhomes? What explains, or there was a lawsuit and they just had the insurance, so they were able to cover their costs. I'm just curious about those townhomes that we are seeing developed.
Yeah, I can take the first crack with that. I assume a lot of them are going to be for rent, but there's probably also a number which I don't know in terms of the size of your product, where it probably doesn't make sense for a class action lawsuit or that aspect of the quote unquote attorney groups to go after, right? So if you're just going around town building duplex here and there and selling each one off or something, I don't think you probably have that concern, right? It's still possible to do a condominium plat or a single family kind of attached plat, but obviously that's not going to move the needle in terms of housing affordability. So, but I'm certain that there's projects around town, and like you're saying, right? Some are probably mostly are for rent, but then there could be some for sale in that aspect as well.
Yeah, not knowing exactly what the projects are, be a stab in the dark, but for those that are continuing to build it, it either is very, very high level class A expensive, and or the developer can self-insure. And so that mitigates that risk. But I was just at cul-de-sac last night, which is, in Tempe, and they want to do this too. And so they were pointing out all of the townhomes and the condo or the apartments around that they were all for rent.
Yeah.
My question is Colorado. I know you've looked at what they've been doing. When I lived there up in Breckenridge, we had a hyper housing crisis, major workforce housing crisis. We were building condos up there. And this was sort of talked about, but I think a lot of people just took the risk because workforce housing was required. And, they were able to sell, like workforce units, deed restricted. So I guess what did Colorado do? Just how do we do it?
I know, no, Sarah, I have the same question. The one thing, because I've actually been talking to the legislators in Colorado that worked on this. I don't think, again, we're reinventing the wheels. There's one thing, this is what a number of states are doing. One thing that they did that's very interesting from anything that we've talked about today is they have an opt-in warranty program that the developers could do by saying, okay, if you're going to build this project and you opt into this warranty program, I think there's another level of inspections. Then that gives you protected coverage from potential lawsuits down the line. And so I think that's the one thing that I've heard them work on uniquely that I haven't heard any other states work on. And so we're kind of trying to explore if that's something that's relevant for what we're doing here. But when you put everything up side by side of, Washington, California, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, they're all mostly all the same. So it's really us just trying to figure out, okay, what is going to make an impact and what good pieces can we take from all of this to really address this problem? And then getting the stakeholders around them to agree on it. So it's kind of like a two-part solution, but I think their warranty program is very unique to what they did. And that just passed like 4 months ago. So it's still TBD, if that is impactful and what the uptake is on that. But I think Colorado, from the conversations I've had with them, it was still a contentious issue there, but they had political will and a lot of force behind it to really address this head on there. So I'm hoping we can like carry on the wins of that in this state too.
Well, I think we're right at the end of our time here. So join me in thanking our panelists for making the shutdown from Phoenix and joining us in this.
Yeah.
Hopefully you find this stuff much more interesting, keeping them in the dark or less interested. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.